Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating intersection between academic theory and pure digital horror. We're going to answer a big question. How do the best interactive experiences manage to tell incredibly deep, rich, and frankly terrifying stories without ever saying a single word to you? To figure this out, we'll be looking at some specific academic research on game narrative, but we're going to apply it to one of the most infamously dark worlds ever created.
Picture this for a second. You step into a massive, completely ruined cathedral, and way at the far end of the room, a majestic robed figure wielding a bow turns to face you. But as you get a little closer, the horror really starts to set in. The figure is totally limp. It's actually being puppeteered. Because what you are fighting isn't the human-like figure at all. It's the writhing, massive abomination beneath him, which is actively digesting him while you battle. This isn't just a random gross-out moment. It is a literal masterclass in storytelling.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Meet Aldrich, devourer of gods. He is essentially an expansive sludge of maggot-ridden, rotten flesh, humanity dregs, and bones. Just lovely, right? But he wasn't always this way. To truly understand the sheer depravity of this specific encounter in the game Dark Souls 3, we have to look at who he was, and maybe more importantly, who he is currently eating.
So our victim here is Gwyndolin, the divine god of Anor Londo. Now, if you dig into the lore, you discover that Gwyndolin was the last remaining deity of his city, and he was actually raised as a daughter because of his incredibly strong affinity with blue moon magic. He totally represents tragedy and fallen majesty. And on the other side, we have Aldrich. Aldrich started out as a normal cleric for the Way of White, but he had a severely depraved habit. He absolutely loved devouring humans. The contrast here is incredibly jarring. You have absolute divine royalty being violently consumed by a gluttonous, mutated sludge of a former priest.
If we track the chronological descent of Aldrich, it is genuinely terrifying. I mean, he actually begins as a human cleric in year 1, but he eats so many people that by year 50, he is exiled to the Cathedral of the Deep just to hide his crimes. And he keeps going. He literally bloats into a drowned pig, softening into sheer sludge. Yet, he gains so much power from this rampant cannibalism that by year 100, he's made a Lord of Cinder. And that's not for his virtue, mind you. It's purely for his terrifying might. Fast forward to year 500, he awakens, totally disillusioned with his throne, with one grotesque goal: to eat the old gods. Which brings us right back to Gwyndolin. But here's the absolute magic trick of this entire scenario. The game never tells you this horrifying story directly. There's absolutely no long cinematic cutscene where a narrator sits down and explains Aldrich's backstory. There's no dramatic dialogue where Aldrich monologues his evil plan to you. As a player, you literally just walk into that room and fight him. Yet the dedicated players of this game know every single detail I just told you. So how is that possible? Well, to answer that, we need to take a quick step back and look at how games have historically told stories. In a fascinating academic paper titled Storytelling Through Games Mechanics, researcher Qingqing Zhao really digs into the evolution of game narratives. In early games, designers heavily relied on non-interactive text boxes to deliver their stories. You'd walk up to a character, click a button, and essentially read a novel right there on your screen. And while that's direct, Zhao argues that this completely halts the interactive gameplay. You literally have to stop playing the game to start reading the story. As games evolved, developers tried to make this slightly more immersive, right? They started putting the text into in-game books, so you could find a bookshelf in the virtual world, open a book, and read up on the lore. But Zhao's research points out that this is really still just a direct imitation of traditional literature. It completely breaks your immersion in the virtual world because the act of reading a static text box is completely separated from the actual mechanics of surviving, exploring, or fighting.
So the crucial takeaway here is that for a game's story to be truly immersive, it simply cannot rely on the tools of other mediums. It can't just be a movie with interactive bits, and it certainly can't just be a book with walking sequences. Zhao's thesis argues that a true narrative in this medium has to integrate with the interactive mechanics themselves. The story must be told through the very actions you, the player, take to actually progress.
And that brings us perfectly back to our Dark Souls case study. This game is incredibly famous for doing exactly what Zhao's research advocates. It uses something called diegetic evidence. That means it relies entirely on real objects and clues that actually exist within the reality of the game world itself. It essentially forces you to become a narrative detective, piecing together the sheer horror of Aldrich through the items you find and the mechanics you interact with on your journey.
Now, consider how the game actually delivers this context to you. When you finally defeat Aldrich, you receive an item called the Cinders of a Lord. If you manually open up your inventory and read the description of this item, you'll find this exact quote. It's entirely optional, the game doesn't pause and force you to read it, but if you take the time to look, it confirms exactly what that grotesque sludge was doing.
And oh, it gets so much darker. You can also find a warped ring called Aldrich's Ruby. The description notes that Aldrich bequeathed these rings to others so they could share in the elation of devouring men. He literally wanted his followers to experience the means to bathe in screams and eat the very shivers of life. I mean, wow. Again, you find this item naturally in the world, and just by holding it in your virtual pocket, you learn about the deeply sadistic nature of your enemy without ever once breaking the flow of the game for a cutscene.
Now, let's look at how this builds directly into the gameplay mechanics, because this is where it gets really brilliant. Zha's research emphasizes storytelling through action, and the fight with Aldrich does this flawlessly. First, visually. You can clearly see Aldrich using Gwyndolin's malformed body to interact with the environment. Second, if you listen really close to the audio design during the fight, you can actually hear shrieks and moans of pain coming from Gwyndolin. He is in a semi-conscious state, being continuously devoured while you are fighting for your life. Third, returning players know that Gwyndolin used light blue magic. But in this fight, the magic being fired at you is this corrupted, sickly purple. The mechanics themselves are actively telling you that the deity has been completely defiled.
And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate fusion of gameplay and storytelling. Get this, during the fight, if you hit the humanoid body of Gwyndolin, you just do normal damage. But if you attack the writhing, rotting sludge below the waist, you actually deal 50% more damage. The game's underlying math is mechanically proving the story to you. Gwyndolin is just an empty, dying puppet. The sludge is the real enemy. The true vulnerability lies in the hideous form of the devourer itself. You are literally learning the lore through your sword swings. It really leaves us with a fascinating perspective on where interactive media is heading. Will future designers just continue to rely on those traditional literary techniques, pausing the action to make us read a wall of text? Or will they rise to the challenge presented by researchers like Qingqing Zhao, building worlds where the story isn't just handed to us, but is something we have to actively uncover and survive through our own mechanical actions? I mean, when a game can make you feel the visceral horror of a god being eaten alive simply by tweaking a damage multiplier, you really have to wonder what interactive storytelling will show us next. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I'll see you next time.